Hi, it's Bonnie with So Inspired by Bonnie with a second try at our Tuesday's tip. I didn't realize that we lost our feed completely about 8 minutes in to the Tuesday's tip, and so I'm going on and on and on, and then I finished, I wrapped it up, and I thought I saw a little bleep, and I thought that even though we lost the feed, that it came back. I apologize. I hope this doesn't happen again where we lose the feed again. But let's go ahead and we'll try this one more time and discuss stabilizers, because I know there's a lot of you that struggle with stabilizers. And I wanted to get this tip out there, so I'm going to try it again, and hopefully, keeping our fingers crossed, it works. So let's go over here. I'm going to set up the computer and make sure I've got you, and hopefully I haven't lost everybody that they gave up on me. But again, we'll get this eventually. It's all a process, and I will post it later on YouTube and Pinterest, and of course it'll be on our Facebook page. So I will kind of like this and let everybody know I'm here, and hopefully I don't lose you guys this time. I am so sorry that happened. Okay. All right. What I'd like to discuss today, as I mentioned before, is stabilizers. And I'm just going to start from the beginning because I'll probably delete the other one and we'll go with just this one. What I wanted to discuss, and I hope I don't lose my chain of thought having this blurb happen, is stabilizers. And there's three basic weights of stabilizers. There's a lightweight, a medium weight, and a heavy weight. That doesn't matter. There's those weights in a tearaway, and hi, it's good to see some people coming back. I'm so sorry. You will see the three different weights in tearaways as well as cutaways. And I ran into some issues with one of the cutaways, specifically a woven cutaway, probably because it has a bias on there. I'm really not sure, but we're going to discuss that in a little bit and tell you what I ran into. Let me get, because I had all of this laid out perfectly, and then this all happened, and now I'm a little bit Twitter-pated. So anyway, bear with me while I get my bearings back. So when you are working with a design, I'd like you to think about what you want to match up your design with your fabric first. And what I mean by that is you don't want to put something with 100,000 stitches on a chiffon, because your chiffon is a very lightweight, fluid fabric, and something with 100,000 stitches is just going to change the hand of that fabric completely. So you want to match up, and this is especially true, I think anyway, with the lighter weight fabrics. You want to match up a nice design to work on a lightweight fabric. If you have a lightweight fabric, go with an outline, a red work design, something like that, you know, that's nice and fluid and very low density. With the heavier fabrics, you can get away with a heavier design. But then let me back up. For example, if you're doing denim, does that mean you can't use a lightweight design on denim? Absolutely not. I've seen jeans that have red work going up and down the jean leg, or pant leg rather, and it looks great. It's a nice open design just going up and down the pant leg. But I've also seen some pretty dense designs going up and down the pant leg. So once you have matched your design to the fabric, then you're going to want to match up your stabilizer to that design so that it holds up well. And again, you don't want the stabilizer to change the hand of your fabric. Now I can't possibly cover everything there is about stabilizers, but I can give you a tip here or there, and we can cover things in the Tuesday's tips. If you have some specific questions, we can go over those. Or if I run into a tip on a stabilizer, we can go over those. Which is what is today, that I ran into a tip with the poly mesh stabilizer. Have you ever done a design and say you know that it was stabilized properly, and you pulled it out and you went to iron it, and then the puckers started to show up? Well, that's because more than likely either the fabric wasn't pre-shrunk and it began to shrink, or the stabilizer wasn't pre-shrunk and it began to shrink. So I always advise to pre-shrink your fabric so that you don't get any surprises after the fact, and also pre-shrink your stabilizer if it's a woven. I have not seen this issue with the non-woven stabilizers, but I have seen it with the woven stabilizers. So what I like to do, let me back up a little bit, because we were discussing designs and matching up a design to your fabric. When it comes to matching up a stabilizer to design, generally speaking, anything that's around 7,000 stitches is going to work well with a lightweight stabilizer. Anything that's getting around 8 to 15,000 stitches, great with a medium, even up to 20,000 stitches. But when you start hitting that 20,000 stitch mark, you might want to consider either layering a couple of layers of stabilizer or using a heavyweight stabilizer, because you definitely need more stabilizer the heavier the stitch count gets. That being said, a gentleman that was in the stabilizer business for many years, and he sold it for many years, was really knowledgeable, and it always stuck with me. He said, if you use more than 2 layers of stabilizer, you're using the wrong stabilizer. And what he means by that is your stabilizer, like I said before, is light, medium, and heavy. And generally speaking, and this is very general terms, your lightweight stabilizers are going to be somewhere in the 1.2 to 1.8 ounces. Your medium weight are going to be in around 1.8 to 2.2 ounces, say, and then your heavyweights are going to be around, high 2s to, like 3.2 ounces. So you can simulate a heavier weight stabilizer by layering a couple of lighter stabilizers together. But generally speaking, you're going to use more money doing that, because there's not that big a price difference between a medium weight stabilizer and a heavyweight stabilizer, or a lightweight stabilizer and a medium weight stabilizer. But if you're using 2 layers of a lightweight stabilizer to get you where a one layer of a medium weight stabilizer would do, then you're using twice as much. So you're wasting money. That's what I'm trying to say. It's cheaper in the long run to just go ahead and get a medium weight. Now, that's not to say if you just have one project, you don't need to go out and buy a 20-foot roll of a new stabilizer for one project. You can get away with layering a couple of layers. Now, when I'm talking about layering stabilizer, I am not talking about a topper. To me, a topper is not specifically a stabilizer. A topper is something to hold down the nap of a fabric while embroidery is happening so that your stitches don't get lost. Or if you have a fabric that is kind of spongy, like a knit or a sweatshirt, they're kind of spongy and so the stitches can get lost. A topper will hold the stitches up above while it's stitching so they don't get buried down. That's not really a stabilizing job. So to me, if you have 2 layers underneath and a topper on top, the topper, it doesn't count. So generally speaking, 2 layers of stabilizer. If you're over that, you might want to bump up the weight of your stabilizer and save yourself a little money. Okay, so back to what I was talking about before. I used a poly mesh stabilizer on a certain project, and I brought it out. It looked great in the hoop. It looked great when I took it out of the hoop. Not a pucker in sight. And then I went to iron it from the back like I do. Iron my fabric. Of course, the stabilizer was still there. And then I noticed some tiny little puckering. It wasn't major. It wasn't horrendous. But it bugged me because you spend all this time, effort, money, whatever, to get your perfect little project done, and then when you go to iron it, there's a little bit of waviness or a little bit of puckering. It just drives me nuts. What I finally figured out was happening, because I pre-washed the fabric, so that was all shrunk. The only thing that hadn't been pre-shrunk was the stabilizer. And so what I like to do, if I'm using a woven stabilizer, again, I have not noticed this issue with my non-woven stabilizers, but by all means, test your stabilizer at home. See, and if there is a little bit of shrinkage, go ahead and do what I'm going to show you now. When I take my poly mesh and pre-shrink it, I iron it with the same heat that I'm going to use on my fabric. So if my fabric's a cotton, I would iron it with a cotton setting. If I'm going to spray starch my fabric, I would spray starch my stabilizer. If I'm going to use steam on my fabric after the fact, I would use steam on my stabilizer. I just treat the stabilizer like you think you're going to treat your fabric, and run it through its paces. And what I did was I cut 2 10 by 10 squares of stabilizer to test my little theory of what might be going on. And I noticed between the 2 stabilizers, my 2 squares, one that was ironed and shrunk and one that was not, there was about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch difference on a 10-inch square of stabilizer. So what happens when it's ironed, if it shrinks, that's going to pull things in and it's going to create a little bit of puckering. So pre-shrink your stabilizer to avoid that issue. It just takes a couple of minutes. Now, how do you properly layer stabilizer? If you're using more than one piece to kind of simulate a little bit heavier weight stabilizer to handle the heavier weight stitch counts, how do you do that? What's the proper way? If you have a woven stabilizer, like I have here, there's going to be a little bit of stretch. Your fabric is going to have stretch on the bias, and we want to control that stretch that's on the bias. So I've drawn a line both vertically and horizontally. There is a little bit of stretch on the bias on my woven stabilizers. You're not going to see that with your non-wovens, but you will with the wovens. So when you're laying the stabilizers, and maybe you just want to do this, I mean, this is still, I've got 2 layers, but it's still real pliable, so it's not going to change the hand of my fabric. When you layer the 2, you want to put them at not a 90-degree angle, because what happens when you put them at a 90-degree angle, I've just turned this sideways at a 90-degree angle. I don't see any straightaway lines going through my bias, and that's what I want. I want a straight grain going through my bias so that there's no possibility of stretch. So what you do is you put those at a 45-degree angle. So you're going to tilt. I kind of got shifted here, trying to hold this up and look to make sure that you can see it. You see that now I've got a straight grain line going right through the bias, and that's going to control the bias that's on my fabric above it, as well as within the stabilizers itself. So that way your stabilizer is going to get the maximum control, if you will, to the design being stitched on the fabric. I hope that makes sense, because your fabric has quite a bit of bias stretch. If you take it, there's quite a bit of stretch there, and when you're stitching your design, it's pushing and pulling on the bias as well as the straightaway, but it's not going to have any problem on the straightaway because it's not going to move. But on the bias, even though it's in the hoop, it could shift a little bit. So the proper way to layer your stabilizer is to put the two layers at a 45-degree angle from one another. And again, you want to, I drew these lines so that you could see the line going through the bias. Now, how do you tell that you've got your not your fabric, but the stabilizer at a 45-degree angle if you're not that great at angles? If I'm at a right angle, that's pretty easy. I can see that everything's a straight line on my edges. If I'm at a 45-degree angle, I will see that all my edges have a point sticking out. That's kind of a quick visual on how you can tell that you've got your two pieces of stabilizer at a 45-degree angle. So that works really well. Now, on the poly mesh, have you ever seen someone wear a white t-shirt and you see this big white square behind the design? I know I have, and it's a little distracting to say the least, even though the design itself looked perfect. If you see a big white square behind it, it's a tad distracting. This only seems to happen on your white t-shirts where you can kind of see through a little bit. I haven't noticed this on, like a black t-shirt or a red t-shirt or, the colored t-shirts, but I have noticed it on the light colors. Maybe even a light bright yellow would show through. That being the case, did you know on the poly mesh they make it in 3 different colors? They make it in white, black, and this nude color. I would recommend on the light t-shirts to pick a stabilizer that matches your skin tone so it blends in with your skin tone and not shouts out that I've got stabilizer behind my t-shirt. So that they do have that available in various colors so that it can blend with your complexion. So if you have a fair complexion, you might want to use the nude stabilizer. That's pretty handy. Okay, on the fabric, my stabilizer fell off. It's okay. On my fabric, what I like to do with it, as I mentioned before, is I like to pre-shrink it so that I don't get any surprises after the fact of the fabric shrinking and then causing puckers. What I like to do is pre-shrink it, but then I also like to add spray starch to it, and I will spray starch it and iron it. The spray starch is not a stabilizer, but it certainly helps beef up the fabric so that it holds up to the stitches better and I get less puckering. So I do like to do that. When my embroidery is done, I like to iron on a hard surface with a pad. And this is a So Steady or a So Betty. So Steady or So Steady Betty or a Steady Betty. That's what it is. It's a Steady Betty. And you can see I've kind of ironed it, used it a lot. But I do like to put an old towel on top of it, something soft, pliable with a nap. Then I take my little design, and this little guy, excuse me, this little guy came from our Zoo Buddies set, a little elephant, and I put the design face down into the towel. And that way my stitches have a place to go. It's like magic. If you do happen to have a little pucker or two, using this method will get rid of 9/10 of any kind of puckering you might have had. But what it also does is, which is really cool, I love what it does for embroidery, is it takes your stitches and gives the stitches a place to sink into, as opposed to a hard surface where they get flattened out. If I were to iron from the top, my embroidery stitches would risk being flattened out. So I like to iron always from the back and have a a towel where the stitches can actually sink into, and that way my stitching actually kind of pops off of my fabric. So that's a neat little trick that I like to use on all my stitches. And I'm so glad that some of you came back and found me again. Again, I apologize, oh my gosh, for losing the feed. I didn't realize that it didn't come back. So I'm talking to myself. You know, hey, if that's the worst thing that happens, I guess we'll survive, right? I think that covers my little tip on using the poly mesh, the woven type stabilizers. Definitely you want to kind of pre-shrink those before. One other tidbit I wanted to add is if you're using the fusible type of poly mesh, one, make sure you put it face down, the fusible side down, into a Teflon sheet. That way you can lift it back up, and make sure you don't get your iron on that fusible side. So they do make a fusible kind of poly mesh, which is great, but you'll kind of want to shrink it on a Teflon sheet so that you don't have any issues with your sticking to the surface. Okay, I'm going to look at the computer real quick and see if we have some questions. Yeah, Karen, we are here. I'm so glad you guys are here. Aw, Leanne, thanks for wishing me a happy birthday. Yeah, it is my birthday. Am I showing my age? I feel like I kind of blundered a little bit today with losing the feed. Let's see, Julie was asking, is that vinyl that you ironed on the Elephant? This is a heat transfer vinyl that I used in the Elephant. Yeah, it's the heat transfer that's the Glitter Flex, and we sell over 50 colors of Glitter Flex now on our website. So we have a lot of sparkle going on. And at the website, it's a lot of fun. I love the look that it gives to the design. It just really makes them pop and takes them to a different level. You know, we're always looking for something new to try, and it's been a lot of fun playing with the Glitter Flex and all the added sparkle. And I know I'm getting some questions over here. Oh, thanks for the happy birthday wishes. I can't see. I think it's Maria. I don't have the best eyesight, so I'm trying to see it on my phone, and it's way over there. I try to see it on my computer, and it's locked. It's not rolling over like my phone is, and I still have not figured out why it's doing that and not cooperating. Bad computer, bad. But anyway, I will repost this on our YouTube channel as well as our Facebook page. It'll get posted there, and we will post it on the Pinterest page. So if you're not live with us, I'll give you several options, whichever you prefer, to be able to view this video again. If I don't happen to, well, thank you, Teresa, for liking the little elephant. I just think he's so cute. I had a lot of fun digitizing him. I love his big little ears. He reminded me of Dumbo when I digitized him. Oh, thanks, Ginger, for the happy birthday wishes. I appreciate that. That's very sweet. I don't see any questions about the stabilizer, but again, if you have some questions, feel free to post them in the comments. Feel free to share this video with your friends and family. If they are sewists and are interested in stabilizer, we'd love to have them join us. Be sure to join our newsletter, and you can do that at our website, which is www.sewinspiredbybonnie.com. That's S-E-W, not S-O. We give out sometimes freebies, new releases, so you know what we're up to, notices that we're doing the Tuesdays tips and when those will be. You know, it's just to kind of keep up with each other on what's going on. So, you know, the sales that we're having, all of that is in our little newsletter. So I hope you've picked up a tip or two on, definitely you want to pick out the design to match your fabric. And once you have those two that you feel match well, you want to pick out a stabilizer that's going to work well with your design and fabric so that it doesn't change the hand of your fabric, yet gives you the stabilization that you need for the design that you've chosen. Again, lightweight, medium weight, heavyweight. Those are basically your three choices, and then you've got a tearaway or a cutaway. One thing that I mentioned in the other video that I forgot to mention here, have you ever done a sweatshirt and you threw it in the dryer and you used a tearaway, and then you pulled it out of the dryer and it was all rolled up where the embroidery was, it was all rolled up like a little ball, kind of. It was just kind of crinkled. That's because you used a tearaway. On a sweatshirt, definitely, again, with your knits, always, 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 I can't stress it enough, use a cutaway for anything that's a knit. You want, the knits will hold that nice and flat, much, much better than a tearaway for that very reason. So just wanted to add that and make sure that everybody got that, because I've done it, and if I've done it, I figure somebody else out there has done the same thing. Hopefully I'm not the only one that makes those kinds of boo-boos. But, you know, I've often said I learn sometimes more from my boo-boos than I do from my successes. So anyway, and I want to share those with you so that hopefully you can avoid some of the boo-boos that I have made along the way. But I think that will wrap it up. Oh, thanks, Sandy, for the kind words about the animals. Thank you. Judy asked, what stabilizer to use with the glitter flex? Again, it's going to depend a little bit on what fabric you're using, but with the cotton fabric, generally speaking, I have had really good results with one layer of a medium weight tearaway. If it's getting in that 20,000 mark, I will put 2 layers of the medium weight tearaway together. You don't have to do the cross hatch or the 45-degree angle layering with a woven, a non-woven stabilizer, but because I have that habit of putting the 2 layers of stabilizer at a 45-degree angle whenever I put 2 together, that's what I do. I always do that. I don't know if it's because I'm afraid something might happen somewhere and I'll have a little gremlin working his magic or what, but it's just we're all creatures of habits, and that's my habit. If I put 2 layers of stabilizer together, I always layer them at a 45-degree angle, even though I think it only really affects the woven stabilizers. So, and I think that, Kimberly is asking, you said to shrink a fusible on a Teflon surface. What would be a Teflon surface? What I meant was a Teflon sheet. You know, we have those Teflon applique sheets. You can just lay that on top of your ironing surface to protect your surface, your ironing board, from the fusible hitting that. So just a Teflon sheet. It's a little portable, they roll up, and they were used a lot on appliques and such. But that's what I meant by that. I hope that clears that up. Judy asked, hoop both layers. I think that's a question. Do you hoop both layers of the stabilizer? I do, just to avoid any slippage. That's a personal preference. Some people, equal results, they might just lay it under there at a 45-degree angle. That's fine too, as long as it doesn't slip on you once you start embroidering. So what you might want to do is, I know a lot of machines have a basting stitch that is super duper handy. Layer that second layer underneath the hoop at a 45-degree angle. So again, you'll have little points sticking out instead of, you know, straight edges, and then do your basting stitch from your machine around it. That will hold the stabilizer in place, and then do your embroidery design. The basting stitch around the stabilizer is awesome. I love that feature on many of the machines. Ginger said she had a lot of boo-boos. I'm with you, Ginger. I've had a lot of boo-boos too, but what was it that Babe Ruth said? You know, he struck out 1,000 times. Well, you know, if they can strike out 1,000 times and still be the best all-time hitter, then, you know, I don't feel so bad. So just look at boo-boos as a learning experience. That's what I do. Okay, I think that does it. I think we've answered all the questions. If you have any more and think of them, please write them in the comments section, and I will double check and I will answer the questions and go through them. Thanks everybody for your happy birthday wishes. I really appreciate it. That's really sweet. And I hope to see you next Tuesday. And again, don't forget to sign up on our newsletter. You can do that at www.soinspiredbybonnie.com. Until next Tuesday, bye-bye for now.